So maybe just in terms of looking at the film, maybe the first thing I'd like to do is try to sort of imagine life 1959 in America. In terms of 59, actually the film, it was interesting in terms of doing the research. It was they began to shoot on January 2nd, 1959. And any historians, there was actually a really, really significant event that took place, 1959, January 2nd. That was
Sputnik?
Well, not Sputnik, being on the right, Jack. And
January 1st, 1959, Fidel marched into Havana.
All right. Fidel took over it, actually, January 1st. He goes into Havana January 2nd. And also the Russians launch actually some sort of rocket, which is the first one that sort of orbits the sun. So here on this day, you know, the one that orbits the sun. So January 2nd, we have been starting this filming. No, it wasn't Sputnik, it was Lunik, it was called. So that same day, January 2nd, 59. Also 59, just to give you some sense of other things, obviously we're enmeshed in the Cold War with Russia. 1959, they had that famous sort of confrontation between Nixon and Khrushchev when Nixon goes to Russia and the famous kitchen debate, where they're in that like sort of model kitchen, they're sort of, you know, thrashing out the differences, the struggle between capitalism and communism. Alaska and Hawaii become states 1959. The Dalai Lama was forced to flee Tibet 1959. So sort of 59, you know, sort of still coming out of the 50s. 50s, obviously, you know, sort of all the McCarthy repression, the Cold War, as I said. And there's an interesting book, a guy wrote a book that he says that sort of 59, sort of the world's starting to change. And just a couple of quick quotes from that. He says, the flight of the Lunik set off a year when chains of all sorts were broken, and verve and apprehension, not just in the cosmos, but in politics, society, culture, science, and sex. A feeling took hold that the breakdown of barriers in space, speed, and time made other barriers ripe for transgressing. 1959 was the year when the shock waves of the new ripped the seams of daily life, when outsiders became insiders, when categories were crossed and taboos were trampled, when everything was changing and everyone knew it, when the world as we now know it began to take form. So basically, you know, you have this situation, and in terms of, you know, sort of popular culture, obviously, you know, this was sort of not a, you know, mainstream film. This was done just out of curiosity. Any idea how much the film, how much money they raised, and how much it cost to make it? Any guesses?
$1,500.
How much is it? It actually $7,000 it cost to make. But you know, in terms of mainstream film, the big sort of films, you know, films that dealt with similar topic. Obviously, had Rebel Without a Cause, Nicholas Ray's film, and also you have Marlon Brando in The Wild One. It was sort of the same sort of, you know, figures arising in popular culture. Obviously, you know, you have figures rising in popular music. You have people like, you know, Chuck Berry, Elvis Presley. So there's a lot of things that were sort of going on in terms of, you know, some of the characters that we see in the film, like in terms of the beat world. So 59 already, Ginsberg had already written Howl, then he read it for the first time in San Francisco in 55. 57, by the time that this film was made, Kerouac had already written and published On the Road. Sort of a sad sidelight. I guess by 59, Kerouac was already like, you know, he had such alcohol problems that Frank and Leslie relate that they didn't really, you know, he wanted to come up when they were filming, and he would like sort of bring up other Bowery characters, you know, drunks that he just sort of had been drinking with, so they sort of restricted him. He wasn't really, you know, they didn't like him coming, you know, sort of while they were filming. So Howl had been obviously published, as I say, on the road. 59, really, anybody into photography, a really seminal book that was published by Robert Frank that year was The Americans, right. Frank, up to that point, had been basically a photographer. That he was Swiss-born, emigrated to America, late 40s, then in the 50s, he gets a Guggenheim grant, travels around America. The basis of a couple of these trips, he produces 27,000 photos that he edits down to 83 photographs that becomes The Americans. Also 59, another character who's not really involved in the film, but it's Burroughs. And Burroughs' Naked Lunch gets published 59. So things are sort of opening up in a certain sense. And
actually, Naked Lunch was published in segments in big tables.
Right. Prior to, but then the whole...
like the mid to late 50s, because I remember reading.
Right. In the segments, but the first, full publication, 59 in Paris, right?
Sure.
And so, like, in terms of looking at the film, you see all these characters who've basically been central figures down on the Lower East Side. As I say, Alfred Leslie, who's lived down here pretty much his entire adult life. Robert Frank, Ginsberg, who lived down here, moved down here 53, lived here till 97 when he died. Amram lived here then, doesn't live here now, but sort of been involved with the scene. Other people we're going to see involved in tangentially, people like Jonas Mekas, who has the anthology Film Works. In terms of my looking at the film, the things that I find really interesting is you get a sense that there's this artistic community. And in terms of that community, people are working together. You have painters like
Larry Rivers.
Right, exactly. Larry Rivers plays the Milo character, which represents Neil Cassidy. That Rivers lived on 13th Street until he died. Down here is entire Rivers, musician, painter. Here he's acting in the film. That so you have this, this cast of characters that these people who sort of work together, that sort of collaborated. Yes.
Is it okay to ask you a question? You said Larry Rivers died?
Yeah.
Several years ago? Or?
A number of
But
years.
he lived down in Long Island for a number of years because I played with his band.
Yeah.
Back in, at Hopkins.
He had a loft on 13th. At the end, Ginsberg
20
moved that
years
same
ago.
building there. But I mean, in terms of looking at the film, you have this group of people, filmmakers, visual artists, musicians, dancers, collaborating. In terms of age, you have people, sort of intergenerational. The mother is, anybody know who that was? Plays the bishop's mother in the film, very prominent artist.
Alice Neal.
Alice Neal, exactly. Okay, so Alice Neal is in the film.
Is he a painter or you say
Painter,
artist?
right.